Okay, this first piece I'm going to share. I'm going to share a screen with it too. This is called the AI Alt News. AI clearly has a lot to learn. Dear my love, as we our antique bridges burn, as silicone hands rummage through our pockets, stealing it all right down to our shoes and socklets. With their sampling, they're stealing all we know. Knowledge workers, you've been robbed of knowledge jobs by the silicone mob. Look out below. Remember wages, they'll drop quite fast. Not so slow and drop so very, very low. Once, my friend, we feared the migrant traveler. Oh, our cushy jobs, we thought the ruthless unravelers. Immigrants, we were told once, the great big bogey. All those errant traveling Mexicans and their great big stogie. It was said they'll take our jobs across the land as they are hedges and lawns trimmed with gnarled, aching hands. Then construction went the complaint as Mexicans and Guatemalans picked up nails and hammer, and all the new construction got migrant laborers to build and paint, or else into the slammers went. But this fresh labor threat has a different origin from laboratories with computer corporate encouragement. Just for profit, they'll not deny it when all those lunchrooms are suddenly quiet. The jobber up the road from construction through knowledge worker raised up from technician to manager, suddenly AI creates a brand new silicone barrier. So many entry-level jobs will be filled by uncounted heartless silicone slobs. Doctors and lawyers are not immune, nor are their jobs. See them go boom? Drivers, stockmen, warehouse workers will just make room like robot surgeons with a very tiny boom. Sure, from time to time there'll be human babysitters standing nearby. There'll never be an eager quitter, crossing guards and robot plumbers. No more cabbies or busmen. What a bummer. Speaking to the mic now, dearly, so your robot gynecologist can hear you clearly. Dr. X7580 is on the job. His hand is cold, but his gaze is steady. Even the soldiers on patrol are now robotic. No more flat feet or arthritic knees. No more neurotics needed, if you please. No more shell shock or PTSD. They're trained to enjoy the sound of screams, never shirking from the attack. No more body bags or mile-high corpses stacked. What a brave new world. Our corporate overlords are dialing up. Senator, is there more than a trace of hemlock in that corporate logoed cup? Already, artists, writers, robot cameras are deployed, and their favorite former unionless humans who once had those jobs, now their free time they may enjoy. Now replaced by vacationless overtime-free AI. No more middle managing executives to oversee these guys. We're replacing 70% of workers, say the Chinese. This will certainly drive the few workers left to their tangy bowl of beans. And then this other piece for your amusement. This is, oops, not that one. This one, the Mexican mouse. The Mexican mouse visited my house. He told tall tales as far as he could stretch. You know what he said would happen next? He dared all the poets, the girls and the boys to gather their verbs, their nouns, and such toys to construct an elaborate structure of whimsy and climb up in the roof and then down through the tiny brick chimney. He found some cheese that made him quite pleased. He marched right up to it, up to his knees. He found cottage, mozzarella, and parmesan. It reminded him of the farm when he was little that he grew up on. He found a tiny horsey hidden, you say, deep in the straw, so not to give himself away. But this little charger was just the right size for the Mexican mouse to saddle and ride. He rode round the kitchen, searching this way. His tiny steed was lurching. Despite his tiny size, there was no great leap he wouldn't try. From the floor to the kitchen counter in one great leap, then up to the cabins to the very peak. From there he could survey the kitchen complete, the knife rack, the double sink, the fruit juicer. He might climb down to it, but he'd never be a user. The Mexican mouse, first plan he hatched was to pry open the fridge. He had an idea if he could get off this ledge. He would slide down to the handle and check for release. He had designs on that sum that kept all the cheese. He would pry open the suction fit lock. He rummaged through his memory, but it seemed he was stuck. He noticed a can of WD-40 and suddenly thought of his sweet cousin Morty. Morty loved to disassemble locks. He loved every new trick from the bottom to the top. He used the straw nozzle of that lubricating spray, and whatever came out extra, he'd use on his skates. He pushed and he shoved till this thin straw went in. He squirted that lubricant for a night and a day. You might have been longer. He'd never tell. As long as he's got 2 volumes of memoirs to sell. From the inserted straw, it bubbled and rolled down the seam. Little by little, that mouse got his dream. The fridge door swung open. It caught him by surprise. He blinked and he burned when he saw inside. He found a strand of coiled spaghetti. He knew he was ready. He looped it in a spiraling lariat, gauged how high he'd have to toss it yet. He spotted a dangler off the side of the cheese plate and decided as an anchor it might work just great. He tossed his loop and it snagged some celery, which seemed at first downright neighborly. And as the Mexican mouse climbed the sticky noodle, he thought he spotted some Austrian strudel. He glanced round the savory favors and wondered how best to summon the neighbors. He pushed the cheese plate over the edge and making sure the plate just caught a smidge, he spun in the air and landed right on its bottom. The cheese slides flew off as each neighbor grabbed on him. And then another drop of mustard landed on our hero, which raised her profile way high above zero. It seemed the family cat had seen much enough of that. Young Mr. Fritz, the family cat, liked his mice deep in mustard, whether yellow, spicy, or even pale as custard. Our mousy hero, high atop the plate of cheese, directing disbursements according to the needs. He stood tall, and as another drop began to fall, his attention remained on the cheesy plate after all. He waved off the warning of his old friend Nate, who was steadily watching the cat in a very nervous state. The perched cat, who'd been watching all through all that, licked his lips at the tiny mouses below and their cheesy tails and toes. He jumped at the clatter, leapt in the air, got scared, and got snared. The lacy curtains, the window tangled the fumbling, tumbling kitty. The sight wasn't pretty. The panicked cat was tangled and dangled high above a sink full of dishes. Deep in the soapy water bubbles, he was stuck like a fish in a net unless he gets free and has some luck. We'll have to soon see. He might just splash in the sink or sunk, kerplunk. So the Mexican mouse saw that tangled up cat and the predicament he was in and where he was at. He called all his immigrant neighbors away from their labors, the voles from Venezuela, the Honduran kangaroo rat, some agoutis from the Amazon who still had their guayaberas on, some coatimundi who had arrived just last Sunday, capybara from Colombia, and a pack of rainforest rodents from the Panama, but you know that. Some degus from Uruguay insisted they want help, and it was just their way. A couple of Patagonian maras and 3, oddly enough, named Sarah. Some nutria rats from Guyana, fresh from out of the sauna. The pecaras from Chile had already gathered and were willing to once they finished their bananas. The mouses and the rodents came out of the hat. They climbed the curtain up to where the cat sat, suspended precarious above the seeds in the sink, and just couldn't leave him struggling there. What would he think? They tugged and they tangled to free this one tabby. It was like some lawyer had conned the clauses and were all written so shabby stuck there in boxes. The cat seemed to object. Where were they from? Well, they all came to free him, this precarious, perilous snare up there. They traveled to rescue the cat from his dubious, precarious cradle. He couldn't get out. He was tangled and mangled, just wasn't able. He untangled his claws, but still tried to snag them. He swiped and he swallowed. He just couldn't bag them. He's reached for those mice, not out of fear, but from malice. He hoped to put them away in his sharp, toothy palace. Not even American rodents, not a single one. Why would you help me? What have I done? You're a stuck cat in trouble. We didn't want you to drop. We knew unless we helped you, your struggles wouldn't stop. You'd end up in the sink, all covered in bubbles, in a sink full of broken dishes, sharp knives, and no end of troubles. Mind the dishes and the froth. We wanted to save you from a drop into that soapy, scalding broth. They clambered over the precarious cat, who struggled and wriggled until he knocked off his hat. The hat floated down to the sink, what do you know, and exposed a sink full of knives, all gleaming in a sparkling glow. Oops. He found himself thanking each one of the rodents, even though they weren't Americans, but then I guess you know that. He was just a cat, and he was a Mexican mouse who lived in that house. So thank you, my friends. Hope you enjoyed it.
Bravo, bravo.